Welcome to the Grip Strip Podcast, episode 71, the open wheel centric episode of the Grip Strip Podcast. We'll be talking about Formula One this weekend, the Hungarian Grand Prix, previewing that, discussing Ver, and all that went on with that. We'll get into the second drivers for both of those teams, along with possibilities of an upset. You know, there have been plenty of drivers that have won their first race at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Is that a possibility this weekend? We'll talk about the points, both in drivers and constructors, and then also any type of silly season rumors. IndyCars, where they're still on their hiatus in part due to the Olympics, but they will be coming back for the Grand Prix, Nashville Grand Prix on the streets of Nashville, Tennessee in the coming weeks. There's been testing. Certain drivers are testing ovals, specifically Roman Grosjean and Jimmy Johnson. And Roman Grosjean is somebody that we will be discussing since he is somebody who looks to be moving on to another team in 2022 for a full-time effort and running, which means he'll run the whole series. We'll go over Formula E. We'll go over the London E-Prix in some detail because it's Formula E. We'll talk about the qualifying format and how basically, in my mind, it's idiotic. And it's basically why we have the sort of championship situation as we do going into the final round. And then also with the exits of a couple of manufacturers, what does that mean in regards to series health and viability overall when you consider the convergence between World Endurance Championship and IMSA with prototypes and a lot of those OEMs looking at that formula, possibility of IndyCar or other places going and having options for some of these manufacturers. We'll go into the roundup and we'll do some promotions. Not Josh this week. He's on vacation, so I called in the heavy artillery. I wanted to go and call somebody who's way more prepared and thorough than I am. And I had to go across the pond to do it. I had to go and call one of my friends from one of the former episode or previous episodes of the show, and also somebody that we worked together on the Grid Talk podcast. One of the two hosts of the Monkey Seat podcast, Tom Horrox, is chilling at home in the evening. His cat has not interrupted yet, so that is a good sign. Yet. Wife is outside, so he's got quiet, so he's very happy. It's not 3:00 in the morning having to do the podcast. I wanted to be very respectful to our co-host for this week's episode and actually do it at a proper hour in jolly old England. So thank you, Tom, for coming on. And how are things going?
Yeah, great, and thank you for having me back on. It's great that I'm not going to be quite as husky as I was last time. Although I'm equally as tired because it's been a very busy few days with planning for various things that are happening in my life. So yeah, equally as tired, but not quite as husky. So that's a definite plus for your listeners.
Yeah, I mean, for whoever does listen at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not really worried about it. I just talk for the sake of talking and I go and say effed up stuff. So I do it on Grid Talk and people laugh at it. Here, nobody listens to it. So I don't give a fuck one way or the other. Either way, let's talk about people that I don't give a fuck about, and that's Max Verstappen and his team of whiners and their consistent crying about this. The accident during the at the British Grand Prix, the aftermath of that, leading up to this weekend's Hungarian Grand Prix. Practice will take place on Friday, and they'll have two practice sessions. Will be a regular setup this week. They announced this week that the second sprint deal will be at the Italian Grand Prix. So, which is all right. It makes sense. That'll make the qualifying a little bit more interesting on Friday too. But yeah, Hungarian Grand Prix, last race before the summer break. The Lewis Hamiltons won there 8 times. and that's one of the two circuits there in Silverstone. He's won at 8 times, trying to go for a record-breaking ninth win and be the all-time winner at any racetrack in the history of Formula One. At the same time, Max Verstappen is trying to recover. He had a huge points lead, 30-plus point lead, and now it's down to 8 after the uh, the incident at Silverstone. And in regards to the constructors' standings, that gap, which was close to 50 points or thereabouts, is now down to 4 in between Red Bull and Mercedes. So I'll throw to you, Tom, in regards to this first piece here. In your mind, is it Max Verstappen that is a clear cut favorite for this weekend, or do you believe that Mercedes and the upgrades that they brought at Silverstone are going to make enough of a difference to where Lewis can fight and possibly compete not only on Saturday but definitely on Sunday when it all counts?
It's going to be a really interesting one. I'm not convinced either way, to be honest. I mean, it's Hungary has always been a very strong circuit for Lewis, and generally British drivers as a whole, from my perspective, seeing Jenson Button winning his first race. I think it's 15 years ago today, actually.
Wow, yeah.
Nigel Mansell won there.
Locked up his world championship there.
Yeah, and there's been multiple. I think Damon Hill
Damon Hill won his first
there.
race there.
Yeah, so it's just one of those race circuits that's been very kind to the Brits over the years, and Lewis as well, as you say, winning 8 times, which is just phenomenal. When you think back to like how there's been no seasons when there's been double headers. You know, he's so that's all just 8 years he has been the best car there, and sometimes it's been in inferior equipment, sometimes it's been in the best equipment. So he's probably won 3 races there in inferior equipment. And I think this weekend he will be in inferior equipment, but will it be enough? It's a track that's just full of medium speed corners. There's no really, really hard braking zones apart from turn 1. So it's going to be one of those tracks that lends itself to the Red Bull philosophy, which it's just teeing it up perfectly for. I mean, can you imagine a scenario where Lewis wins the race and gets fastest lap, and Max Verstappen comes second? We then have to sit on a month of those two tied on points. It's going to be great. I really hope that they can go in to the break even, because I do think the second half of the season Red Bull are going to push on and potentially win the championship. But it would just be great if we get to the halfway point in the season and it's absolutely level pegging. So yeah, I think it's I would say Verstappen is probably the favourite, but you cannot write Hamilton off. I would have potentially written him off in Austria because it was obvious that Red Bull were the clear favourite for pace. Not even a little bit. They were clear favourites, and that hasn't happened this season. Like the other way around, even you could say Barcelona Mercedes had probably the slightly quicker car, and that's the only race you could really say that. But Red Bull were clear out front in Austria, so I don't think they'll be that far ahead, but I think they will definitely be the car to beat. So yeah, it's going to be what can Valtteri do and what can Sergio do as well, because those two are going to now, especially with that double 0-pointer for Red Bull last time out, the Constructors' Championship is now hot up as well. So I cannot wait to find out what happens this weekend. And I'm just ashamed that I'm on holiday and I'm going to miss it. I'm not going to see it live. So.
Well, it is a Hungarian Grand Prix, so I mean, even though for me it's a good one because of who my favorite driver is, it's never been one of my generally favorite races. It's a race that sells out, and that's part of the reason why they've had it on for basically as long as I've been alive. Yeah, I think Saturday qualifying is going to basically set the tone. I mean, practice, I figure Max. They're going to test the engine that was involved in the accident in practice 1. So probably that's a throwaway. That might be a Mercedes practice. I think in practice 2, Red Bull will come back. Then in practice 3, we'll kind of get a general gist of where things are at. But I think it's going to be a couple of tenths within. It's really going to all come down to Q3 and who puts down the better lap. Max has been the better qualifier this year, honestly. Um, Lewis's starts have been mediocre to awful for a lot of the year. And fundamentally, if that happens again on Sunday and say the two teammates are behind, he could get jumped by both Valtteri and Perez. Now, more likely Perez, because Valtteri has been just as bad on the start. So it's going to be something. I mean, I'll never count out Lewis Hamilton no matter what. But it's teed up like you said, Tom, that Red Bull should take this one and take the momentum into the break. But the scenario of Lewis going and coming through and getting everything, getting a maximum point performance versus Max, and then Max goes and finishes second. To have a tied score with a month break would be ideal going into the second half, since we don't even know where some of the races are going to be coming up either. It looks like, there's been rumors of, the outer circuit at Bahrain. There's been, two races at Coda. There's because they already sent it. I got an email from the Circuit of the Americas. I subscribe, and they're like, if we had two races, would you come? And I'm like, well, let's see if you're actually going to have two races. You haven't had a Formula One race in a couple of years. You're talking about having the MotoGP race. So that's fine. But if you're going to have two races at Austin, who knows? Maybe make it a little more cost effective. So then I could actually justify putting myself through the pain of flying to Austin during COVID time and then going and putting myself through all the nonsense to go and watch a Formula One race. Sure, maybe I would do it.
I would love to. I'd love to go to Austin. Even more than once, it'd be brilliant. It's a great track for Hamilton as well, and it's just a great track all round. I mean, it's the Herman Tilke greatest hits track. It's often known as.
Yeah.
Because it just copies Maggots and Beckett's and various other corners all around the world. So it's a great circuit, and I would love to see a double header there. One of which with a sprint race, so we get three races at Coda in one year. That'd be good. I don't think we're going to be going to Brazil. There's question marks over quite a few Grand Prix. I did have a very strange rumor today. Actually, I forget which media outlet it was, but it was a reputable media outlet, and they said there was talk of a possibility of going to Qatar this year.
Yeah.
Which that's completely left field. If you'd have asked me would there be a Formula One race in Qatar in 2020 or 2021, sorry, then I would have just laughed at you. So there's some really strange things happening at the moment, and who would have thought that we'd have had a stranger year than 2020? But it could end up the end of the season could be the complete opposite to last year, where we just don't know where we're going. At least last year we had some flexibility at the start, and then it all kind of settled down, and we knew what was going on. But this year it looks like it's going to be unsettled right until the death. So as you say, we don't even know how many races we're going to have. I think we'll have 23. I'm pretty convinced we'll get the 23, but just where they'll be, who knows?
Yeah, and I think that's another piece is the fact if they do run 23, or if they're going to go and lower the amount of races, how that would affect a world championship scenario, both world championships. You look at not just for the Mercedes and Red Bull situation, that we already know they're going to take the top two spots in the drivers, they're going to take the top two spots in constructors. But you go past that, and how these points battles are with McLaren and Ferrari in constructors, the third place in drivers. Then you go and look at the bottom of you have that mid pack battle, or you have the two pods there. You have the AlphaTauri, Alpine, and Aston Martin battle, and then you have the bottom three trying to move themselves up and avoid, it's not relegation, of course, but basically less money. Williams, of course, standing out in that scenario, and of course Putin Haas, because they suck. But then you look at, I mean, I guess that goes into this next point. I mean, we talked about Bottas and Perez briefly there, Tom, but I mean, I don't think of Perez as somebody this is one of his better circuits. I mean, he does well on tighter circuits, but I've never really remember any like standout performances for him at Hungary. I think Bottas, this is a track that kind of suits him and suits his style. And when you consider where he's at and the notion that he either might be going to Alfa Romeo or Williams or WEC at this point, I mean, for all intents and purposes, let's be fair here. He is not going to be driving that second Mercedes next year. I don't care what Lewis is saying. I don't care what anybody else is saying. It's the end of the road for him. And a certain number, 63, is probably going to be on that car next year. But is this an opportunity for Bottas to kind of just sneak up on the battle between Lewis and Max, put together a round that, he does once a year, and kind of like what he always does at Russia, and kind of go and sneak up on everybody and put a pole together and put a race together? Can Perez actually show up in qualifying for once and actually qualify in the top 3 and put himself in the mix? Because he's always a better racer than he is a qualifier. He's never been a great qualifier. And honestly, that could really change the tide in regards to that particular race, in regards to both battles, both drivers and constructors.
Yeah, it's. I think that the problem I find with Perez is that he's not really spectacular anywhere. Really, I mean, realistically, even his first win in was it Sakir or Bahrain?
Sakir Grand Prix.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, even his first win in Sakir, he came from the back to come through, but with the safety car and the free pit stop, he had a massive tyre advantage. So even then, I wasn't, he did well, but he wasn't spectacular. He's never been spectacular, and when he's been close to that, he's ended up throwing it away. The guy finds qualifying very difficult, and he can't ever seem to get a decent start. So, straight away, you've got a pace disadvantage in qualifying, and you're not good at starts. You're never going to beat Max Verstappen, realistically. His best chance is that he reenacts his behaviour from when he was teammates with Esteban Ocon and Jenson Button and punt his teammate out of the way. But he'd have to get close enough to him to actually do that, and I just can't see him ever doing that. So
I would sign for him to punt his teammate, actually. That'd be great.
That would be hilarious, but I can't see it happening. But it would be hilarious. But it's just I can't see Perez getting involved unless Max Verstappen decides that it's martial law and he's going to invoke some Jos Verstappen style justice on track and punt Hamilton out of the way to a chorus of boos all saying that Hamilton should be banned, no doubt. But while Karen Horner's there waving his bell and saying no, it just does my head in. Anyway, so I'm going a little bit off topic there. We're talking about Sergio Perez, and I can't see him. Let's say, unless there's something happens to those guys, I can't see him being a factor for the win. I can't see him being a factor at all in the race. Bottas is fighting for his future, but to be honest, a Bottas fighting for his future is like it's like a kitten playing with roll the toilet roll. It's not really gonna. It's not a particularly frightful thing. An angry Valtteri Bottas. So the only person on the track who is disappointed when they announced that Sochi would be moving, but I don't think he has to worry about it because I don't think he'll be in Formula One when it does change. So it's not really going to affect him. Again, he just. The answer really for me is no. The role that they have to play is to beat each other and be as close to their teammates as possible so that they can pick up the maximum points. And if their teammates are out of the race, to try and maximise it. We've seen that Bottas can't do that. We've seen that Perez potentially can do it from time to time. It takes the master of all cock-ups from Lewis Hamilton to Baku for Perez to win a race in a Red Bull. And it takes a horrific racetrack in the middle of Sochi for Bottas to win a race realistically. So the fight that they're going to be in is going to be with each other and for their seats. To be honest, I don't think Perez is nailed on, but I just don't see who else they're going to put else in that seat. Well, I'm sure we'll get to that when we get to silly season. There's me jumping ahead in the running order again. Feel free to slap me down.
You're okay.
But yeah. So that's kind of it really for me. There's not really a lot that they're going to bring to the party. If something crazy happens, they could potentially have a say in it, but they're not on raw pace. Neither of them.
Yeah, and it's not going to be it's going to be boiling hot and sunny, which is usually Hungary weather. I mean, the only time I remember, I think, was when Button won, and then maybe a couple other years where there was some sort of precipitation, and then Eddie Lawson when he won his last Grand Prix on a motorcycle, on a Kajiva '92 when they had rain at frickin' Hungary. But uh, when it comes to Botas, I mean, he's checked out. I think he's already 1 foot out the door. He doesn't give a crap anymore, and that's part of the reason why they're so far behind. One of the many reasons why they're so far behind Mercedes. Perez has been fine, when you compare him relative to like Albon, or not Gasly as much, but like Albon or Kvyat or some other second driver that isn't, like Daniel Ricciardo, who really wasn't the second driver, but he was basically demoted to that because they all like to have a circle jerk with Max Verstappen and Jos Verstappen and all those other idiots. I mean, that is just a group of douchebags if I've ever seen them. But they're gonna have they have to show up. It's really about their battle amongst each other, also for their seats or whatever seat they're trying to get, and then also with Lando, which, as Tom is the number one McLaren fan that I know, very happy about, having a great year, only driver to score points in every race this year, and he has outshone his teammate Daniel Ricciardo, uh, all year basically, and he's in a battle for third in the drivers' championship and, third year in the series. Think so, right? Third year in the series, and
Hmm.
he's really taken such a big step forward. McLaren is taking steps towards getting back to where they were for many many years, which is the front end of the grid. And I mean, I guess, if I know your answer, if you didn't think that Botas and Perez could do it, we were talking about on Grid Talk. We always have the dark horse, or like the wild card, or I forget what the topic is. The At
The
the end
bold,
of the show, the bold
the bold
prediction, yeah.
prediction, yeah.
And so I think this weekend, I mean, Lando is going to be up there. He's been qualifying well. He's been qualifying way better than Daniel. But I think Daniel Ricciardo, this is one of his best circuits. It's a place where he's won at. I think he podiumed with Renault last year. I might be off on that, but I feel like he ran well there. He
I
ran
think he
top
did.
five. Yeah. And so I feel like he's going to do well and get a podium this weekend. And when you consider Ferrari, they're all about one lap pace. They don't really have race pace. And you see how Leclerc's been doing, and Carlos Sainz I figure that battle is something else that we really have to consider in regards to how tough it is to overtake, at the Hungaroring, and their relative pace, albeit, once you get in a long run pace, it's really a problem for both cars. But I do think McLaren and Ferrari could do something in this race to affect the overall, feel, minus, Lewis versus Max.
Yeah, when you're talking about people that can influence results, it's a sad state of affairs when the clear top two guys in the championship, or top two cars in the field. I am more confident about Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, or Lando Norris affecting the result of the race than I am about the guys in the fastest cars. I think this. I would love to say, given that it's how well the Brits have ran in Hungary in the past, that Lando could potentially push for it. But I would be more on the, if you're asking me for a bold prediction, then I would be saying Charles Leclerc for the race win, because it with the medium speed corners, the donkey in the back of that, the horse with the limp is not quite as he's got a chili pepper up his ass for this one, because it's not so essential for speed on this one. There's nowhere really that's going to suit them better, apart from potentially Monaco. So I think we're going to see the Ferrari as the lead fight, taking it to the Mercedes and the Red Bulls, and could potentially cause some headaches. I think you'll see one of those Ferraris, if not both of them, ahead of Perez and Bottas in qualifying. I think that's a good shout to say that. I think it's a very it's going to be it's going to be difficult to say which one of those Ferrari boys does it, because they seem to take it in turns to see which one is going to pull out the best performance. Invariably, the bad luck tends to drop towards Carlos Sainz, and Leclerc seems to be the better qualifier. But yeah, we've always called him Sunday Sainz. He just gets on with it on the Sunday and just what I think happens is I think Ferrari say, right, let's split the strategy. Let's give Leclerc the best strategy, and then we'll give Sainz the alternate strategy. And Sainz invariably makes the alternate strategy work, because it just seems to me that Leclerc always seems to have the what you would think would be the favourable strategy, but yet somehow Sainz somehow pulls out the best result. So which is why they're so close in the standings. And obviously Leclerc got a great result last time out, which so he's pulled away a little bit now over Sainz, but to only be 2 points behind after 10-11 races, and he's just joined the team, it's a solid effort. Ricardo, yeah, I just had a quick check, and I was quite surprised to see that he was actually 8th for Renault last year at this track, which did surprise me. I thought this was one.
This was one that he did have a podium or top five.
Yeah, I thought so. No, I thought so as well. I mean, he does run well here, but it wasn't last year. It was Lance Stroll in Racing Point that was 4th. And it was the Hanver bot at the top. So it's so slightly surprising, really. But yeah, Ricardo does run well here, but I do think that the McLaren strength is in a straight line. So this track might not be suited best to them. I think it's going to be a bit of damage limitation, similar to Austria, and then the second half of the season is all going to be about. Is much more suited to the McLarens the second half of the season. So if they can go into the summer break ahead of Ferrari, then they've got a good chance of holding on. But what I do think is going to happen, both of those teams are going to take their foot off the gas for the second half of the season when it comes to development, because they've got that 3rd and 4th place pretty much sewn up in the championship now. There's no one's going to catch those two teams. If they between 3rd and 4th, it's not going to make a vast difference to the business plan of Ferrari, and McLaren would back themselves to out-strategize a Ferrari team that has also stopped developing. So I don't think it's as important. I think they're both going to take their foot off. You'll see them start to fall away from the guys up front, and you'll see the guys behind start to close towards. So it's going to be a much more competitive end to the season. But whoever's in front at the summer break, I think is going to be the one that's going to stay there. So I'm itching for that to be McLaren on this occasion. But those two teams definitely in with a good chance of causing an upset this weekend, more so than any other weekend so far, apart from potentially Monaco.
Yeah, I think McLaren is just going to keep on going from strength to strength in regards to what they've been doing. I do believe, even though their strength is straight line speed with the Mercedes engine, they have a better car, and they have the. I think they have the best of the 4 drivers right now, albeit Charles Leclerc had that second place finish at the British Grand Prix, and he led most of the race, and he is known as a great driver that kind of has been held back. And of course, Sainz had I think he had the podium at the Monaco Grand Prix too. So, I mean, it could line up for Ferrari, but I don't see it. I think McLaren holds on, whether it's Lando, whether it's Ricardo. That's the first of those to be determined. But I think that's where it starts and ends. And then once they go to Spa and even the Dutch Grand Prix, I think those races post summer break are going to be in the wheelhouse for them. And I do agree with what you said, Tom, in regards to the lack of development. You can make an argument that even Mercedes, with the way they shown up this year with their car, almost was kind of like a half. I said it earlier to somebody else on Twitter that it was a half-baked, commitment, almost as though as they thought, oh, it's okay, yeah, we don't have to really fully commit, we'll be fine. What happened is Red Bull decided to show up and improve their car. Not only that, you have Honda, who all these times they've left Formula One have usually been in a bad way. Like 92, they got smoked by the Williams Renault. Then in 2008, they were a joke. And then they almost left Formula One with the McLaren deal, and that could have been a disaster too. but they joined Red Bull. So now they're going to actually officially leave, whatever, so to speak, leave, and they want to leave on a high note. So they brought a better power unit. They keep on developing. They keep on trying to put themselves in a position to give Max the best chance. And to be fair, Max Verstappen has taken a step forward and upped his game to where he is at that elite level that so many people have put him up there. Not only the butt buddies that he works for, but the people, like, he's actually taken that step forward. And all those things combined have meant that the 33 car has been up front most of the year and made Lewis Hamilton have to work for the possible eighth world championship and another constructors championship for Mercedes, another consecutive constructors championship for Mercedes. So yeah, when it comes to the driver standings, as I said, 8 points. Max Verstappen has 185 to Lewis's 177. Then in the battle for third, it's 9 points between Lando Norris, 113 points. Bottas is 5 points back, and Perez is 9 points behind Lando. Then in the sixth and seventh are the Ferrari duo. They're in their own little world. Ricardo, Gasly, and Vettel round out the top 10. Vettel and Alonso, who have been around each other for a lot of the year, are battling for that last spot in the top 10. Alonso has woken up from his retirement hibernation and been really good in recent races, uh, making the Ocon re signing look kind of poor and also showing that they do have some pace depending on the circuits. Probably will be a dark horse guy, I would say, for this weekend if he can take off, get into Q3, because he's Fernando Alonso. Um, when it comes to constructors, Red Bull is up by 4 points on Mercedes. And then Tom mentioned it, McLaren and Ferrari are in their own little world. A 15-point gap right now, McLaren has over Ferrari. Then it's 9 points between AlphaTauri, Aston Martin, and Alpine. Aston Martin and AlphaTauri is only 1 point, so that in its own right, Pierre Gasly, somebody to watch on the smaller, tighter circuits. Vettel has made his bones this year in the Aston Martin on the tighter circuits. Stroll, as Tom brought up, finished fourth at this race last year. His best finish was at Baku years ago in a Williams. So who knows? That could be an interesting little battle. Can Sonota keep it on the track? Will Sonota do something crazy and crash into somebody? Or will Sonota be like current day Takuma Sato, stay calm and sneak up on everybody and get a top six finish? I don't know. I think one of these days that's going to happen because he's basically new age Takuma Sato. But uh, and we got that, and you have Alfa Romeo, Williams. I want to say this part. I figure we always talk about it. George Housen, a former guest on the show, I took over his bold prediction during the race preview, and I said that George Russell is going to score points this race, and I believe it not only because I'm a part of the fandom that I want him in the second Mercedes seat, but the way that they have been running in recent races, Williams, there's a really good possibility, all things considered, he can qualify in Q3 and they don't bin a pit stop. They can get a point in this race, honestly. I don't know who's really going to stand out. Yeah, Alpine might be there, Aston, AlphaTauri, sure. But in Austria, George showed that he was right on the cusp. And I think the Hungaroring is the place that we finally get over this hump. And it leads to the eventuality that they're probably going to announce, whether it's at Spa, whether it's at the Dutch Grand Prix or the Italian Grand Prix, that he will be promoted to the Mercedes seat. I don't know what you think, Tom, but I think this is the week that we finally end the pain for the George Russell fans in regards to him scoring points in a Williams. The debacle that Williams has become finally ends, at least temporarily, with George Russell getting his first points for the outfit out of Grove.
Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, it's something that I've been thinking about a little bit over the week. It's a kind of circuit that it's very difficult to overtake, and Williams need to get back to the days when they were actually good at pit stops. They don't even have to be fantastic; they just have to not screw up. So if it's hardly an if to it, really. George is doing a fantastic job in qualifying. He's getting that car into Q2 and pushing on to Q3. The track itself is in a bit of a bowl, so it's not going to be wind affected. There's there's high humidity at the weekend, so the Mercedes power unit is going to be probably at its strongest, though it is going to be temperature sensitive. So that's one thing you need to look out for on that. I believe we're close to sea level at Hungary as well, which again is where it's at its strongest. It's the kind of track where you can't overtake. It's a go-kart track that you have to manhandle the car. You have to be patient around the long mid-speed corners. You can't take too much apex too early, or you'll end up just completely mounting the curb and going into a wall. It's always known as Monaco without the barriers, which I hate because it's not, but it does share those kind of corners in that kind of way. And as I say, it's just a go-kart track. It suits George. It would be poetic justice to this narrative that seems to follow about British people doing well in Hungary if he were to get his first points in a Williams, British driver in a British team at the Hungarian Grand Prix. I can see it happening. I wouldn't say as much as I'm going to put it as a bold prediction, but it would not surprise me if it did happen. It's not going to be Latifi. He started the season looking like he was going to be a decent driver this year, Latifi, and he just seems to be going backwards a little bit on that front. I've been a bit disappointed in the way this kind of second part of the first half of the season's gone for him. He needs to push on in the second half of the season. And Haas, no one cares. They're not going to be anywhere. Raikkonen and Giovinazzi, who knows? It's a strange scenario where I'm seeing Williams as the most exciting of the three bottom teams now, which I didn't expect to after what we went through last year with them. At least you had the you had the Guntersteiner fuck smash doors and stuff, and that whole kind of Grosjean and Magnussen battle going on, and you had a similar thing brewing at Alfa Romeo, even though it was a boring vanilla version of it. But Williams were always kind of the bottom of the pile there. But now it's for me it's clearly Alfa Romeo that are my least liked team in Formula One. I even put Haas above them just because for lols. It's just a bit more meme worthy and a bit more entertaining. I just don't care about the Alfa Romeos, but at least the Haases you can laugh at.
Yeah, and it's sad for people who respect what Peter Sauber did, bringing the team to Formula One all these years ago, and what they've generally become now. To a lesser extent, also for Mick. I made the reference on Grid Talk, since whoever hosts likes to park me with the Haas segment. And I made the reference that Mick would have been better off driving his dad's first Grand Prix car this weekend at Hungary than the car that he will be driving. He has a more likely possibility of making Q2 in that car than he does in his current car. The gearbox is probably better. It's probably better made. It's better looking. It isn't sponsored by a dictatorship or a jackass either. So be it. Of course, Kimi Raikkonen, you mentioned Alfa Romeo there, and it's a good segue into the fact of the silly season. I mean, you mentioned Sergio Perez may or may not be in trouble. I think everyone knows about Mercedes at this point. A lot of the midfield teams have already basically got their drivers. Ferrari set for next year, McLaren set. So is Alpine. For all intents and purposes, Aston Martin, I think, is set. Because I think Vettel will be coming back. I'm not sure, but
he's on a multi-year deal. The only question mark is Stroll, because he's not officially signed up, but he's not.
His dad owns the team, so it doesn't really matter what he does, unless he kicks a dog or does something like Nikita Mazepin. I actually called him by his name. That tells you I'm slipping. It's earlier in the day. That's why. Um, it's during the week. Or he does something that guy would do. I don't think he's getting let go, even though there are better options out there. Uh, I think it really comes down to the Red Bull, the second seats at the top two teams to a point, and then it comes down to the bottom three. Kimi Raikkonen basically is done. He's toast. They're probably moving on from him. They've done the Alfa Romeo deal again for whatever it's worth. There's supposedly no commitment to having a Ferrari junior driver, which in turn messes with the likes of Callum Ilott, Robert Schwartzman, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I don't know how many Ferrari junior drivers are at this point. There's a lot of them. You look at Alpine and their junior drivers like Guan Yu Zhou, who's going to probably be stuck now, even if he wins the Formula 2 championship, which is a possibility. There are a lot of drivers. There's Formula E guys that there was rumors about that we'll get into in a little bit here in the Formula E discussion, but that are trying to get back into Formula One. You have Bottas likely. There's a lot of moving pieces here on the back end. Williams is going to have a seat open probably. Alpha's definitely going to have a seat open. Who knows? Maybe AlphaTauri goes and freaks on Yuki, but I don't think so. But it's possible because it is Red Bull and it's AlphaTauri. What are your thoughts on that? Anything that you have or you've heard so far in regards to any of the seats in Formula One that are available?
Yeah, well, I nearly had a heart attack, and I got a sick feeling in my mouth when a notice came up on my phone saying Alfa Romeo secure multi-year deal to stay with, and I was like, "Don't be Raikkonen, for the love of God!" But it turned out it was just the deal to stay with Alfa Romeo in Formula One. So I was relieved about that. But certainly from a driver perspective, I'm hearing different mutterings. Some people are saying, yeah, Kimi's done. Other people are saying that he's definitely staying. And I think the trouble is he's a shareholder. I think it's up to him. I think if he fancies staying, then he will stay, which is just the most frustrating and boring thing. But that at least there's no commitment to keep a Ferrari driver in that car, because it means that they can actually mix things up and have someone decent in there. I mean, I'm not against Giovinazzi staying, but not with Raikkonen. He's got to be alongside someone else. If Raikkonen were to go and they brought in Bottas or Hülkenberg or even Kvyat, then I would be fine with that. I'd be interested to see what happens with that. See Giovinazzi up against someone else who's a bit more of a known quantity. For me, Kimi Raikkonen has been going downhill since 2016, I would say. He won his last race in 2014 in the Lotus, and I just don't. Or it might be 2013 actually, but either way, I think it was 2013. But he's not really done anything since then. He's won one race in a Ferrari, which for 2 years was the best car, and it just doesn't make sense. And we saw that he's very close to Vettel, but then they bring in Charles Leclerc, and Charles Leclerc destroys Vettel. So it just makes you think, how long has Vettel been underperforming? I get the impression he's been underperforming for quite a long period of time, which, again, Ferrari having the best car, and yet they didn't get any championships. So in that period, so I just don't think Raikkonen has had a lot to offer the sport. Yes, he has flash in the pan days, and on that flash in the pan day when there happens to be rain and a well-timed pit stop and someone retiring and binning it, and Mazepin not getting out of the way and some blue flags, then yes, of course he might get a 5th place or something this season. It's a genuine possibility, but that's going to be down to the stars aligning and Kimi having his best day. But he has his best day maybe twice a year, and you've got people that need to be in that seat and should be in that seat, and he's just taking up that seat. So I just don't see what he offers to the sport. Like you say, I think it's still in the balance. I don't think they are, even if they've decided their Mercedes are going to go for Russell, I don't think they're going to announce it yet. I don't think they're going to announce it until they believe it's right. And they will believe it's right will be the latest possible opportunity, so they don't demotivate Bottas in the Constructors' Championship fight. If the championship fight looks to be over or very unlikely that they're going to be being able to fight back, then perhaps they'll make the announcement. But I can't. I think they'll wait until the end of the year, as late as they physically can. They may even get something lined up for Bottas and say, look, we're not going to renew you, but we've got you this option and it's Alfa Romeo, or we've got you this option and it's Williams. So they'll have something lined up for him when they sack him, because they don't want to see him drop out of the sport, because he has done a lot for them. So yeah, potentially Williams there. I would rather see Bottas leave the sport than go to Williams or Alfa Romeo, personally, because I just don't think he's, for him it'd be a shame. Big up and coming star into Williams, it gets the promotion to Mercedes, very close to Lewis for a couple of years, then he ends up back at Williams again. It's a horrible scenario, and it's a scenario that I've been in my professional life as well in the past. And it's just, you're the next big thing, and all of a sudden you're back where you started 5 years later, and it's a horrible, horrible feeling. And I just don't see what he would want from that scenario, so I can't see that happening. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with Schumacher, if he stays in Haas, or if Ferrari try and place him somewhere else. If there's going to be no guarantee of a driver in Alfa Romeo, who knows where? I think my gut is he's staying with Haas. Williams, as I say, the Hulkenberg Kvyat has been mentioned quite a bit. They're mentioning Ticktum on a few outlets, I noticed, but he won't get the super license points, so I can't see him. I can't see him getting in there, and also I don't think he's good enough anyway. Alpine is set, Aston Martin is set. AlphaTauri, I can't see AlphaTauri making any changes, and that's really all your movement. It's not going to be a lot of movement this year.
Yeah, you're right on that, and it's more on the back end. Chris Medlin, Racer.com, F1 Insider, they posted an article in regards to this, and basically the discussion that we were having in regards to Bottas v. Russell is one piece, but then also talking about Sergio Perez, in regards to Red Bull, or staying at Red Bull. Gasly is unlikely surely set for a second year develop, even if Yuri Vips and Liam Lawson have impressed. Aston Martin, when the egghead is on the verge of resigning most of his Alpha and Williams because recent, there's Callum Ilott, test driver Schwartzman taking both Ferrari likely retained. Another is Hulkenberg, and so Hulkenberg, everyone talks about the Hulk. I think that's somebody. I mean, be that go on. I also and before the Alfa Romeo announcement happened, I was under the impression that the Hinwil teams, the team that was once Sauber, would go and be like a junior effort with Renault. And take.
Sorry about that. I think I'm the one that started that rumor.
Yeah, no, I figured that too. I've been on that feeling for a while. I mean, and it might have been a better idea, because in turn they could have gotten Guan Yu Zhou in the car. They could have gotten Chinese sponsorships of different value, whatever. You might get the free engines, so then you can go and in turn decide on a better driver like a Hulkenberg back at Sauber for a third go, and then you have Guan Yu Zhou there. I think that would be a better driver lineup and give you a better chance in 2022 than anything they're going to have. But instead, they're going to stay to be the Ferrari team, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I don't even know anymore.
I think the way they've been trying to position it is that Haas is the junior team and Sauber is the associate. I think that's the way they're trying to play it. So like the Haas are going to be the ones that get all the cast-offs, because they'll get the free engines, but they won't have any choice of drivers, because you've got Daddy Vladdy. And whoever Ferrari want to place in that car. They have as you mentioned before, they have a plethora of young talent coming through. They've finally binned off Giuliano Alesi, which was a bit of a mercy killing, to be honest, because he was definitely not worth.
He's not any good. Yeah.
No. I just don't see where Ferrari, if they're really getting behind Mick Schumacher, and with everything you're seeing from Leclerc and Sainz, I can't see where people are going to get into Formula One in the junior series. But at least with Ferrari, they've got their supercar program coming in now. There's other irons in fires as well. So there's other. The Ferrari Junior program is not about creating Formula One drivers necessarily. It's about creating professional Ferrari drivers, and that they will be professional Ferrari drivers, and
Yeah.
that's at least one thing that is going to push people into those areas. And now that Ferrari are kind of expanding, which is good for motorsport as a whole, because Ferrari are a fantastic brand. Even if I'm not their biggest fan, they are a fantastic brand. I was disappointed when they didn't sign a deal to become an engine supplier at IndyCar. I thought that was going to be the next step for them, but never came off. But the supercar Le Mans thing is obviously the route they wanted to go down. So that's I'll watch that with a bit of curiosity as well.
Yeah.
It's just difficult to see where they're going to come from. I can't see Guan Yu Zhou getting in. I don't think he's good enough anyway. If it takes you 4 years to win Formula 2, then you surely can't be up to anything anyway.
Yeah.
Just look at Jolyon Palmer.
Yeah.
It's and Davide Vasaki as well. He was a 3 or 4 year, I think, before he won. So it's just difficult to see what these people are going to get in. Lundgaard I think is a talent, but he's having a really bad year. He's for me the top of the Alpine driver program for me, but I can't see him getting in anytime soon either.
Yeah, and he's already hedging his bets by going and testing for Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan, and associates to drive an IndyCar. So he's already looking, and then I think that's a way to go and get into. It's not the best segue, but it's a segue. We'll talk about IndyCar. The points battle so far this year has been outstanding. You have Alex Palou leading the point standings right now, and they have their break before they go to Nashville Street Circuit, which is a big deal for the series. There's a lot of energy, great energy going on. Joseph Newgarden, a Tennessee guy, being born and raised and winning the last race at Mid-Ohio, winning on an anniversary for Penske. Penske's first win, same day. They won on July the 4th back in 71 or whatever, and then they won on July the 4th at Mid-Ohio. I think if there's one person who's going to want to win that race more than anybody, it's Joseph Newgarden, and he's put himself right back in the points battle. There's really only 4 guys right now that could win the championship, in all honesty. Alex Palou, Pato O'Ward, both of them have 2 wins this year. Palou has 6 podiums. I don't know how many people were really thinking that Alex Palou was going to jump in the 10 car and look like Dario Franchitti in a way, but that's what he's looked like. Outside of Dario Franchitti, and for times here and there, the late, great Dan Weldon, Scott Dixon has not had a teammate that's been able to stand with him at all. There's been a laundry list of people they put through that 10 car. Everyone talks about Tony Kanaan and how great Tony is. He's not really that good, and he hasn't been for a while. The Rosenquist struggled after all these years of build up and Ganassi wanting him, struggled. You had other guys in the 10 car haven't done anything, but Alex Palou is a guy that he was in the Super Formula in Japan. So it amazes me that Honda didn't even give him any type of run to possibly get him in Red Bull program or whoever. It makes no sense to me, but then I don't really understand. That's one thing. All these years of watching racing, it's like you see talent, but then you'd rather take Vladdy's son, and Latifi and the likes like that. That's probably why IndyCar is better, because they at least generally give the vast majority of the field has talent. Palou, O'Ward, who is definitely one of the best young talents there is in motorsport, and I think Frank and Missy Indy Sports Car podcast. If it wasn't for them, I would have never known who Patricio O'Ward was. Wouldn't know about him and the whole background and all this. And because of them, I'm a mark. He is driver for Arrow McLaren Arrow Spam, as I like to call him. So Tom, of course, is a fan of theirs and fan of him. Scott Dixon trying to win championship number 7 to tie AJ Foyt is 56 points back. Awards 39 points back, and of course Joseph Newgarden after his win at Mid Ohio. Couple of close calls before that. 69 points back in fourth. That's the championship battle. They're the two young guns there, of course. Colton Herta won early this year. Renus VK, he had a win this year as well. Marcus Ericsson's not theoretically a young gun at this point. Former Formula One driver got his first win this year. So there's been a lot of nice stories so far this year, youth movement. And then you have, of course, Helio Castroneves finally getting his fourth Indianapolis 500 win in his first start for Meyer Shank Racing. And in turn, basically setting the table to go and run full time in IndyCar again. Which I don't know if a couple of years ago, Helio Castroneves thought he was going to be able to ever run full time IndyCar, but because Jim Meyer's loaded and Michael Shank has enough beer to last him for a lifetime, he will be running full time again next year, which we'll get into in a little bit. But Tom, I know you're an IndyCar guy. You talk about it on the monkey seat. The fact of the matter is there's so many great, intriguing storylines so far this year. But to me, the Palou versus O'Ward battle is a beautiful thing, not only for the health of the series, but it speaks to a lot of different things in regards to two guys that are this talented, that are this young. This could be the future right here. These two guys, to a lesser extent, Colton Herta, maybe even Alexander Rossi, who's kind of in the in-between phase. The next generation of IndyCar drivers right now is setting a tone to really make a very strong series with a TV package generally that's also going to be strong, at least here on our side of the aisle of the pond.
Yeah, there's definitely some great things to look out for. I know when we did our Indy 500 podcast, we had Jack Benyon on who does the Race IndyCar podcast over here, and he said about the whole young guard taking over from the established drivers, bit of a myth, and I'm inclined to agree with him. But you see people like Scott Dixon still doing the business now, and he's no spring chicken, and they shows absolutely no signs of him letting up. I think at IndyCar it looks like you can race a lot more into your 40s. Maybe Kimi Raikkonen can come here for a decade. I mean, even I know Taku's under pressure, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But at 45 years old, he's still putting in some performances that could, certainly more than one or two times a season. He's up there. He won races that weren't the Indy 500 last season, so it shows that he's still got stuff there. And I'd like to point out as well, for when you had me on last time for the IndyCar preview, I said one of 7 drivers could win the championship, and none of those 7 drivers were Palou. So that's just goes to show just how this has come completely out of left field. I mean, I also said that Rosenquist would push O'Ward.
That didn't work out too well for anybody.
Not so good. But I will take credit in the fact that I said that VK would win races, and that Hunter Ray and Hinchcliffe will be under pressure as well. So I'll take some wins there. And I also said that Scott McLaughlin would be the best rookie.
Well, that's not. I mean, to be fair on that,
points wise,
the only points wise. You're talking about the fact that, I mean, we're going to get into one of them in more detail here shortly, but McLaughlin's running a full-time deal with Penske, and he's got a lot of energy behind him within the team and from ownership, while you have another guy who's driving for Rick Ware and Dale Coyne. So that's already a throwaway. So you're already kind of screwed. So the fact he's able to do anything is a miracle. And then 7-time NASCAR champion, who's one of the greatest drivers I've ever seen, struggling mightily to learn a new formula of racing at 45 years of age, which has been humbling. But I'll tell you what, I've never seen a sponsorship activation. I haven't seen an IndyCar sponsor with that much activation on TV or any motorsport sponsor activate that well since I think UPS with Dale Jarrett, the NASCAR champion Dale Jarrett, 3-time Daytona 500, whatever. When the UPS and the Big Brown, like that's basically, I can't remember anybody who's activated, done all these commercials. They're hilarious, they're goofy, they're corny. It shows how good Jimmy Johnson is, that he can take the piss out of himself. And he's definitely taking the piss out of himself because he's struggled and it's been bad. And people are ragging on him like nobody's business. I'm like, dude, the guy's won 84 NASCAR races and he's won championships since he was 15 before he was on TV. He was on TV when he was 15 in the early 90s winning races. Like the fact of the matter is, guy's one of the greatest race car drivers I've ever seen. And it proves a point that IndyCar racing is tough. I mean, it's no joke. And when you've won and dominated in one formula and then you just look like complete garbage in another one, whether it's your fault or not, it's the same way it went the other way. Like you think about like the only person in recent times that has came from open wheel and went to stock car racing was Juan Pablo Montoya. But then you asked all the inbred hillbillies, the only thing they talk about is he had a jet dryer at the Daytona 500. They don't take into account the fact that he had a broken track bar and his stupid crew chief let him go drive back out on the racetrack so he wouldn't lose a lap and then had that happen. That doesn't matter because, of course, facts don't matter to those inbreds. He won races. He was good on ovals. He should have won oval races in a stock car. He came back to IndyCar and then he won another Indy 500. Probably should have won another championship. He's a sports car driver now, but probably should be in an Indy car, but he's too fat. But the fact of the matter is he's still one of the great race car drivers of all time. He's the only one. Dario Franchitti sucked. Sam Horner sucked. There's Miss Hummer is Miss Hummer. Like you can add all these people that went to NASCAR and it didn't go that way. I think the difference is Jimmy wants it bad enough. He's going to be testing at Homestead here, which might be a precursor of a couple things. One is he's going to run ovals next year. Two, he's going to run the Indy 500. Three, they're going to be running Homestead in the IndyCar series next year, which would be cool since they have multi-grooves. So it'll actually be a proper racetrack, not like Texas. So that'll be a positive sign. In turn, you talked about rookies. Romain Grosjean just got through his first test with Scott McLaughlin at the Oval at Gateway, which is one of the best, most well-promoted races they have on the calendar. And he's going to make his Oval debut. And it kind of goes to one of the topics we were discussing. I mean, I think in regards, I'm jumping ahead there. I think we'll do that, and then we'll get into best moments after that. Romain Grosjean is basically the lightning rod of the silly season deal, because to think what happened to him last December in Bahrain and to be where he is right now is amazing. The fact he's still here and all this stuff. But the fact that he not only loves America and loves racing in this series, but now he's more than likely going to be in an Andretti Autosport car next year with, Colton Herta and Alexander Rossi. He's going to be running full time. And he has so much passion for this that it might turn out that Romain Grosjean, former Formula F2 champion or whatever, I think it was GP2 back then.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And he had podiums in Formula One, and at one point was considered his next big great French star. He's going to remake his whole career, almost dies and goes and remakes his whole career, and he's going to be possibly in a position to compete for a championship after driving quite possibly near the worst car in Formula One for I don't know how many years. Is a great, amazing recovery for him. And I think that's the start of it. You talked about Takuma Sato. There's rumors about him possibly being replaced, which, I mean, Ray Hall Letterman, they've had him. This is his second go around with them. He's won them an Indy 500. He's won them multiple races. I've been a Graham Rahal guy for better or worse for a lot of years, and in a lot of ways, Takuma Sato's outperformed him at times. And there it looks like Jack Harvey. Of course, we were talking about Alio earlier. Jack Harvey is out at Meyer Shank Racing. They're looking at other drivers for the second car. Likely one of the young drivers in Indy Lights might be the option because they're an Andretti Autosport kind of like feeder team, a satellite team. So like a Kyle Kirkwood or David Malukas or whoever, somebody in Indy Lights, it seems like would be, or Oliver Askew is another one who basically got run out the door by Arrow Spam. He might be an option. You look at Ray Hall. It looks like Jack Harvey is going there. Whether he's going to be in a third car or in the second car, and they're trying to find funding for a third car. There's a lot of growth, and I think Roman Grosjean for us, I mean for you Tom as well, but with your experience with him in Formula One, I think it's a big season for a lot of people that are involved. Simon Pagenaud is another one that is in news too in regards to the silly season coming up for 2022.
Yeah. I mean, to start with Grosjean, there's a lot to unpick there, but to start with Grosjean, I think he got a lot of stick when he first came across, certainly from people this side and from some IndyCar fans that I heard on various sources of media about the fact that he wasn't doing the ovals. But given like the time that he had to recover, he's still in pain with his hands now. The time that he's had to recover, he would not have had the time to learn how to drive ovals safely, as well as learning the formula. So to come in and to put his toe in the water, test the series, he might have absolutely hated IndyCar. So why put himself in that situation where he's not comfortable? So he's come across with a team that's going to give him a go. He's proven with a pole position and a near race win and some great performances, some bad moments. There's some of the old Romanas come out a couple of times, but he's had a decent season, and now he's got interest from one of the biggest names in the sport to replace one of the biggest names in the sport as well, potentially. And Ryan Hunter-Reay looks like the one going to be making way for him.
Yeah,
it's a great story, and now to then come from that to have a year of learning and a year of spending time with his family and traveling around in his big Winnebago around the States, and then move his family out here, get a house, get a drive in a top team, full backing, full season, and just really go for it next year. He could be in one of those people that we're saying, do you know what, he's in the championship fight next year. It could really happen. I think he'll definitely win races next year if that is the case, and he'll really put a bit of a kick up the arse of Alexander Rossi and Colton Herta. I don't know whether he actually challenges them, but he'll certainly give them a wake up call. There's it's not a free ride at Andretti. They're not the golden children anymore. They've got to watch out because this old guy's coming in and he's not out of things yet. Mm-hmm. Jack Harvey was a real surprise for me. I thought he was absolutely embedded in that. In that team, in Meyer Shank, and the way that they were going about their business, he kind of represented their business model, and it was a real surprise to see that he was out. I think you're right. I think it looks like it's going to be Rahal Letterman-Lanigan, but I do think he's going to be replacing Taku, and I think potentially he'll be alongside someone like Oliver Askew. I think that would be a good shout. Obviously, Castroneves replacing full time. Who's going to be replacing him? Who's going to be replacing Jack Harvey? That's another one. I mean, you mentioned about the youngsters. Maybe Andretti want to put a youngster in there. Maybe they may even look at someone like Devlin DeFrancesco might be an option for that. You mentioned Carl Kirkwood in Indy Lights. I don't know much about Indy Lights, but no, those guys are certainly the big names coming out of Indy Lights at the moment as people to look out for. Like even names are mentioned across the pond as well, not just on around IndyCar. So there's interest in them. They may want to look at, again, people like Christian Lundgaard coming across. Doesn't bring a huge amount of budget, but he certainly with the Alpine Academy, they might want to place him there for the experience. And then you've got Kevin Magnussen, desperate to get into IndyCar. It seems, he certainly equipped himself well at McLaren. McLaren looking at potentially putting in a third car when the opportunity is right. I think they would have to be someone that brings budget for that to happen. But it's certainly something that may well happen in the very near future. So, K-Mag is an option for them if things don't work out with Rosenquist, or if they're able to get the budget together. And I can see them definitely going for the three cars next year in a couple of races, potentially the whole season, if they can get the right numbers together. If they add up to the right numbers, then they could well see that. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to in that, and it's I think next year is going to be even stranger because we could potentially have a new series champion. Well, could potentially have one of two new series champions, or they could be an incredible comeback from Joseph Newgarden. I just find it weird that Scott Dixon is so far back at the moment. I know he's not dramatically far back, but to be 60 odd points behind Palou is just as you said, mind-boggling. I don't see how that's happened. That came from nowhere. He didn't exactly set the world alight in junior formula over in Europe either. So he's obviously found his sweet spot at Ganassi, and he's a thoroughly nice guy as well, from what I hear. So I look forward to that. Pagenaud, yeah, Simon Pagenaud. He's shown that he could still win races. He hasn't won any this year, but he's shown that he can win races. I've got this feeling that he's just gonna. I think this is going to be it for him. I think he's going to be leaving Penske, whether it's his choice or whether Roger's had enough. I don't know, but I can see him going. I can see them freshening things up. Things have got to change at Penske, and I think he'll be the one that will make way. But there's potential rumours that he might be the one that McLaren would look at as well, because he's apparently he's a big McLaren fan. If he's a big McLaren fan, why did he punt off Lando Norris in the virtual Indy 500 at the start of the season last year? Which I still haven't forgiven him for that. But
yeah, well, what is it? Root beer floathead's move on Oliver Askew wasn't any better. So, root beer floathead is Santino Ferrucci. That's a reference.
I figured that.
Yeah, but I think Pagenaud, my thing with him, I thought because he has the Menard sponsorship, because he won John Menard the Indy 500, that he was never going to get fired. And what I realized is Will Power can't ever get fired because he's just generally been irrelevant for 2 or 3 years now, and he's an asshole. And the fact is Roger Penske will never fire the guy. They probably should have moved on from him after last year, but they kept him anyway. Now they're going to give him another extension. I don't know why. Great, he qualifies well, but what does he do in races most of the time? I mean, I get it. He had his time. He's had many great years. He only has the one championship. You can blame it on Dixon. You can blame it on whatever, but he only has one champion. You can blame it on Franchitti too, but it's him. At some point he's past his prime. He isn't the kind of guy that's going to be bringing he's going to give you a soundbite. Good. So then what is he? He's just like the Australian Paul Tracy. I mean, that's literally what he's become, except he's not fat and fully racist and full of shit. His wife's a psychopath too, but that doesn't. But the fact is, I don't get why he's there. They could have done themselves a favor and just moved on from him, because at least Pagenaud, to be fair, is somewhat competitive right now. Pagenaud's 6th in points. Will Power's 11th in points. Pagenaud has the same amount of podiums as Will Power in regards to qualifying. Same amount. No goals for either driver. In terms of leading laps, you have Will Power's led more laps. Okay, fine. Pagenaud his average finish is 4 positions better. He's run at the finish of more races. He's had 3 more lead lap finishes. I don't get that unless you're going to move the sponsorship package over to, say, one of the other 2 drivers, whether it's Scott McLaughlin or Joseph Newgarden. Okay, fine. Then you're going to consolidate to 3 cars. You could go and take Simon Pagenaud and keep him. If Simon Pagenaud wants to do this, it's the same way as Penske convinced Juan Pablo Montoya and Helio Castroneves to move to the Acura DPI program. They both were willing to do it. I think deep down inside, both of them wanted to stay in IndyCar. And I still don't understand why nobody's like, oh, let's call Juan Pablo. If you're going to have all these other old guys, Juan Pablo can still do it. He showed up, ran a one off for arrow spam, and they didn't have the greatest setup or whatever, greatest fastest car in qualifying. Got a top 10 finish out of the deal. You're telling me that wouldn't help Patricio Award go and take another step forward, having a veteran and somebody who's been through as much stuff as Juan Pablo Montoya has been through in his whole entire career, not only prior to being in IndyCar the first time, his Formula One time, going to NASCAR and returning back to IndyCar. That's the kind of guy you need to have if you want to take a step forward. You need that veteran presence at a team. That to me, if I'm Zach Brown and I'm all those people, why not? You have the funding for two cars. Go and deal with whoever you want for the third, but put a veteran next to Pato Award and then take a ringer with a young guy. And you have a team that can compete with the super teams, with the Penske's, the Ganassis, and the Andretti's. That's the way to roll. And considering how deep this field is becoming, it's a smarter move. Pagano has multiple options. You talked about Kevin Magnussen there, Tom. I think his move is he's leaving the Ganassi sports car deal to run full time for Peugeot in the WEC, where I read that somewhere. So it sounds like his commitments are to that, which is a shame to me. I was thinking about that too. He wanted to run IndyCar. He ran one IndyCar race, and fundamentally, he got screwed in that deal at Road America. He ran really well. He fits IndyCar. Like his dad did it, and his dad was all right in it. And I think in the end, it's doing the same thing. His dad became this great sports car driver for decades. And so he's like, well, Formula One didn't go well. I had to drive for Haas, all these things. But I ran IndyCar. I think I should be an IndyCar, could be an IndyCar, but I don't have all the budget. But they want to pay me to drive a sports car, and I could win Le Mans overall. And that's one of the only things I think his dad never did in sports car racing is win Le Mans overall. So I think that's what he wants to do. He's going to get to run with his dad next month at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. But it tells you how good this field is when the likes of Kevin Magnussen, who probably could be an IndyCar driver, should be an IndyCar driver, are just like, screw it. I'm going to go and do prototype racing since that's a growing deal. When it comes to moments that stand out, I'll throw to you first, Tom, in regards to this. I mean, I think you have some great ones to pick from when as a arrow spam guy, but yeah, let us know what you have enjoyed so far this season, whether it's drivers, certain wins, whatever that has stood out as we lead into the second part of this IndyCar season.
So for me, there's been a couple of special moments for this season for me. I'm not going to name any McLaren ones because that just puts me as too, that just puts me as this one-dimensional being. So, yeah, I mean they've been great, but they've been great because I'm a fan of the team. They've not been great because they're special moments in the sport. For me, seeing Romain Grosjean get that pole position at the road course, and then the fact that happened, and then I told my better half about the result, and then she sat there and she watched the entire IndyCar race with me from lights to flag, and she's never watched a minute of IndyCar in her life. And I know he didn't win the race. Rinus VeeKay went and screwed that for me, but it was a great race, and it was a wonderful moment to see him, just like you say, have that turnaround and get that pole and fight at the front. And that for me is the reason why it's now going so well. That what he went through that weekend, and what he really showed everyone that he's still got the talent that everyone believed he had. That's definitely a strong moment for me. I did have another one in my head, and it's just completely escaped me now.
Well, I can go and
go on. You go, and I'll try and remember what that was.
And for me, I mean, I've never really been an Helio Castro Dash Neves person. I've always kind of thought of him as kind of phony and all that, and his shoe polished black hair that hasn't changed for 25 years, but obviously he uses Just for Men or something. The whole like more people know him not for winning 3 Indy 500s, but for winning Dancing with the Stars. It kind of irritates me as a motorsports fan. But then when you consider James Hinchcliffe, more people know him for Dancing with the Stars in his racing career. And the fact that he got shish kebabbed by a suspension piece and almost died. Then that doesn't matter. Oh no, he did Dancing with the Stars with the sexy Sharna Burgess. But uh, yeah, I mean the fact is that win and that battle he had with Alex Palou was one of the best battles I've seen in recent years on an oval, but in general, that was great racing. Uh, and the fact that there was a couple times I thought the race was over. Okay, I thought, oh, that's Alio. Okay, but there was a pass I think with 4 to go, and I'm like, okay, that's it. Hello, this is it. He's going to win the Indy 500. It's going to be a huge deal, whatever. And then Alio came back. He's been close. He lost to Ryan Hunter-Reay in 14. He had another second place finish, I think, recently, and then of course got basically sent to run sports cars. Um, Alio has been at this, I don't know how many years, 12 years waiting for that fourth Indy 500. It wasn't as long of a wait for Rick Mears. I think he did all 4 of his wins in 12 years. AJ Foyt won 3 races of his 4, the first 3 in pretty close succession, and then had to wait a while before he got his 4th and final one. Al Unser won his first Indy 570, and won back to back 70 and 71, and then won his last one in 87. So he had a bit of a wait between the third and the fourth wins. So that celebration, everything that happened with that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. The end of that race. It's a beautiful thing for the sport, and it got people talking about IndyCar racing like it hasn't been talked about in a long time. I think it made people think about Alex Palou, and now the likely possibility of him winning a championship would be a big deal because then they'll be like, "Oh yeah, he finished second to Alio in the Indy 500." There is that. I think the other piece is Alex Palou and Pato O'Ward. I mean, I kind of been a fan anyway of Pato, but Alex Palou and what he's done this year in the 10 car, as a Dario Franchitti guy for many years, is akin to what Dario was doing when he used to be in that car prior to his injury that ended his career. He was a force in that team. He won races. He took cars that were at times not the best for him, and he'd pull it out. He went and scored points, and he was consistent, but he was fast, and he never left anything on the table. I mean, I think Dario was a little more calculated, and he was a little more he had more finesse than Alex Palou, but I think there's a lot of the same characteristics that Dario had with the refinement compared to what Alex has. And he is making Scott Dixon work. And the fact is, look, Scott Dixon is never he's gonna drive for Ganassi until he drops dead. He'll probably be driving until he's 80. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's likely. He has 3 kids now, so he has to make a lot of money. But the fact is, Scott Dixon hasn't had to work this hard in a while, since Dario was around. And it's a good thing. And Ganassi likes winners. He always says that. He was so adamant about that, he got out of NASCAR racing. And now he's going to have 2 Cadillac prototypes next year. He's going to have to hire 3 new drivers at least. So, I mean, but Alex Palou is going to be there for a long time because Formula One ain't going to be calling. So he's going to be there for a long time. And I think the future of Ganassi IndyCar program starts with the 10 car and Alex Palou, no matter what happens the rest of the season, whether he wins a championship or not. I think he's going to be a factor for the future long term. Were you able to figure out
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I've remembered it, and it actually goes back to it goes back all the way to episode 7 of the Monkey Seat, which would have been sort of June time last year, and we had a guest come on our show. He was our very first guest, and he was he was an expert in IndyCar, and he was talking about how he was trying to get funding to get together to get into the Indy 500 in 2020. It didn't come about, and then things happened and things went quiet, and then the same person was pushing and pushing to try and get into 500 in 2021, and then right at the death, it happened. And to see Steph Wilson line up on the
Yeah.
Indy 500 was just absolutely phenomenal. After everything that he's been through, it sucked that he was the first retirement. But it looked to be driver error. I don't think it was in reality. I wasn't able to. I was going to try and get him to come back on the show and talk about it, but scheduling commitments and stuff. He's got a lot going on, so he wasn't able to. But it was just great to see him get that after talking to him about it off air and everything, and it was just great to see that happen. And I was so proud, and I just really wanted it to go well for him, and unfortunately, obviously, it wasn't. But that was the other real key moment for me to see that happen, and hopefully he can get back next year. There's stuff in the irons in the fire. He's made some good partnerships, and he's got some funding. So hopefully he makes something happen next year, and he can do a little bit better.
Yeah, for me as a badass fan, and a lot of us here in America who took a liking to Justin Wilson, as someone who was able to at least talk to Justin Wilson once upon a time and get interview time with him. Uh, it means a lot to see Stefan. He's had a tougher time, of course. It's never been easy for him in his career. I mean, also when you consider your older brother, how well respected he was in so many different formulas. Um, to be able to come back and run Indy and be in a competitive car in an Andretti car, hey, give himself a chance. He's a great guy. That's just period what it is. I mean, sure, it may not be, and he's great in the sim world too. So that's another thing that's there. I think the sports car realm might be calling his name. I would hope that there are teams based on whatever medals, whatever rating he has. I think that would be somebody to get, that he has a lot of speed, and he can do that and dovetail it with limited IndyCar appearances, because the field is growing. And I think a third OEM is coming too. So once that happens, and I think, sky's the limit for IndyCar. Penske is trying to get a more solid schedule. All these things are there. The series is growing, and it's very positive. But yeah, Steph Wilson, definitely, it was unfortunate what happened to him early in the race with the brakes, and a lot of people had issues with brakes and pit entry, and all that. So
Yeah, he was in very good company. I actually
yeah,
tweeted
yeah,
him and told him, I said, "Like, come on, you're in good company. Don't let it keep you
yeah,
down." And yeah, no, he'll bounce back. He's strong.
yeah. Veteran drivers, one-off drivers, lots of guys had that issue. I think Winch Power did a couple of times during the Indy 500 this year, and it tells you can, getting into it next year is going to be something to see how to make the race for sure. We'll transition into Formula E, ABB Formula E World Championship. Last race was the London E-Prix earlier this week. Uh, they were running inside of an arena, looked kind of cool. Then they're running outside. You had the two races, and trying to do the Excel circuit there. Why am I going? Yeah, there you go. Let's do this. I always do this to myself during the show. The results from the race on Sunday saw Alex Lynn win for Mahindra, so yay for me as a Brown guy watching the Indian team win. Yay for Tom, since a Brit won. Nick DeVries, who was coming up in regards to Formula One conversations, finished second for Mercedes, and Mitch Evans third for Jaguar, Robin Freins fourth, and Pascal Verlaine fifth in the race on Sunday. And on Saturday, Jake Dennis, so British sweep, this time for BMW Andretti, Nick DeVries, Alex Lynn, the top three, Lauderer and Rene Rast, uh, former teammates at Audi. In this case, Lauderer driving for Porsche, and then Rene Rast for Audi, top five. I think the takeaways from that is, yeah, British guys winning at home, but I think the more interesting story is Lucas Degrassi's interesting uh, way of taking a penalty there late, trying to go and get around and trying to pull a Schumacher of sorts around a time penalty, and it almost worked, but in the end, it didn't.
Yeah, it's to anyone who didn't see it. Basically, what he did was they were all lining up behind the safety car as they do, and then he was like back there in eighth place, and he just peeled off into the pit lane. Of course, nothing. There's not normally pit stops in Formula E, but the rule states that if you enter the pit lane, stop, and rejoin the field under safety car, then that's allowed. So he did that. He pulled into his pit box. He stopped. He drove off, and then pulled out and came out in the lead. So all very very contentious. And upon the replays, they watched him pull into his pit box, and he was stationary for what could have been a fraction of a second, and he wasn't deemed to have completely stopped. So therefore, they gave him a drive-through penalty, which he refused to serve, and then they black flagged him, which he refused to come in the pits, and then he was disqualified post-race. So apparently, he wasn't told about his penalties, but I don't know how you can not see a black flag. So yeah, he stands by the decision. He stands by the strategy of his team and what they told him to do. But I think it left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, to be honest, to see that kind of thing happen. It's just not. It's cheating at the end of the day. I know it's not in the spirit of the rules, and I thought it when Schumacher did it in I think it was Silverstone back in the day, 1998 or 99 maybe. I thought it was cheating back then, and I still think it's cheating now. It's the equivalent of taking the shortcut on the ghost track in Mario Kart. You jump over, you jump over the gap, and then you come out by the start line. You don't do it. I know you can do it, but you don't do it. It's cheating. Everyone knows it's cheating, and it's just not on. So, given that he was in a championship fight. He was an outsider for the championship. We discussed it on the monkey seat last week with Charlie about how he was an absolute outsider, but he was still in that fight, and now he most certainly is not in the fight. So if he backs the decision of the strategy of his team, then maybe he should be looking at changing teams, because he threw away a guaranteed 4 points and a possible 8 or 10 points for a guaranteed disqualification. In what reality were they ever going to let him get away with that? So poor form for me there from the team. Really let his driver down.
Degrassi too. I mean, the reality is you can't tell me that when you have all the notifications and all the computers and all the things you have, the way that we started the show talking about versus Ham and all the belly aching and bullshitting that was going on to Michael Massey, and he isn't even the person that makes a decision. You're telling me that they don't have any notifications to go and say, no, Moss, you can't be doing this. You have to go and penalize, and you're going to ignore it. You're just going to act like you. I mean, I know Alan McNish is short, but he can see the computer screen. I mean, I love Alan McNish. He's one of my favorite sports car drivers ever. But, dude, that's obvious. It's not something that's going to come off, especially or should be in a world championship as Formula E is. In regards to the points, and I think that's in getting into the final. What is it? They're going to the final race here in a few weeks' time.
It's a double
Berlin.
event.
Yeah.
And so two races, 50 points.
Yeah, so Berlin, double, Saturday, Sunday, double header race, and it's gonna be, in a sense, there are a lot of guys that are still involved in this points, and I think in part it's because of the qualifying. I'll get into it. Nick DeVries leads by 6 points after having a solid weekend in London. The 95-89 over Robin Frijns for Envision Virgin. Sam Bird, double DNFs uh, at home in the Jaguar. Albeit Jaguar is an Indian owned deal. He's tied with Jake Dennis at 81 points, which is 14 points back. 15 points back is DaCosta trying to defend his title. You have Alex Lynn, Nick Cassidy, Mitch Evans, Eduardo Mortara, who at one point was leading the points, I believe, and Rene Rast in the top 10. But really, I think the battle is within, I guess Alex Lynn is the cutoff, maybe. You could maybe give it thought to Cassidy and Evans, but that's 20 points. I think, and Mortara, who was up there earlier in the year, but I think one piece is that is going to come into play, at least on the Saturday race and maybe even the Sunday race. They do qualifying. I mean, NASCAR has stupidity with a lot of things they do and their qualifying formats and their algorithm that they use to set the field for a lot of these races, because every other motorsport series has practice and qualifying except NASCAR. I don't know why. It's pretty dumb. But Formula E's format for qualifying leaves a lot to be desired too, Tom. I'll go to you because you know a heck of a lot more than I do in regards to Formula E. My interest has waned with the series as years have gone by, but to go and set qualifying based on points, and because of track evolution, putting the top 4 in points on the worst track doesn't really make sense. Now, if you tell me that you're swapping it and putting the worst drivers in points out there to clear the track, yeah, they're probably going to be back there anyway. Like let them work their way up the point standings. It gives you more of a incentive to actually try to do as best you can or whatever. Like you would assume they're all trying, but it makes more sense track evolution wise to have the best drivers so far in the year qualify at the end to have the best qualifying, but they don't do it that way.
No. The way they do it, it's similar to the one shot qualifying the Formula One used to do, except they do it in batches. So you have a batch of drivers. I think it's 4 of them that go out at a time, and but it works backwards in championship order. So the highest 4 in the championship go out first, and then they go out at the same time, and then they do that in the groups, and then the top 6 have a shootout at the end. So if you're in Group 1, you're not getting into Super Pole, so you're not gonna have a fast 6 shootout. We had Mark Preston on, who is the head of DS Cheetah at the start of the year, just before the start of the season, just talking about Formula E in general, and he said that he loves the Formula E qualifying setup, and we were all tell us more because we're still fairly new Formula E fans ourselves, and when he said about it, I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. I need to see it, and I've never been convinced by it at all. And to be honest, more and more of the drivers now, the Formula E are starting to attract higher profile drivers, better drivers that are trying to make a career rather than ending their career. That are just happy to put up with gimmicks and just having fun, and a little bit of randomness doesn't matter because they've already had their careers. Now they've got people that are trying to make careers in Formula E, and it is just too random. Nick De Vries is incredibly outspoken about it, and he's now the current championship leader. But just going back a little bit on what you said before about the people still in the championship fight, I think given the way that Formula E runs, you've got Nick De Vries on 95 points, so there's 50 points up for grabs. Andre Lotter is 50 points back. Him, for me, is the first person who's out of that championship fight. You go back to Oliver Rowland on 59 points in 16th place. He's still in the championship fight. I mean, you've got, I said about Degrassi not being in the fight anymore. He's only 3 points further up the road. It's very, very unlikely they're gonna win it. But you look at Stoffel Van Dorn. He's been really, really strong all year. He's on 63 points. that's so far back, but he's still in the championship fight because of this qualifying format. And yes, it's great because it means that you have different winners all the time, but the trouble is the cars, they're not go-karts. The tracks are the tracks. It's a spec series effectively. I know it's spec aero. You've got different power units, but it's not
Yeah.
a vast difference in pace between the cars. You're not going to get a car going from the back and coming to the front. This qualifying format for me would work. It would work in Formula One because you've got the fastest cars starting at the back. They will come through. You bring this qualifying format in in Formula E cars, it's basically you couldn't have you would have Mazepin winning one week, then the next week it would be Fernando Alonso, then it would be Ocon the next week, and then the following week it would be Hamilton because by now he's fallen far enough of the championship to be able to get into the Super Pole, and it's just a complete lottery, and it almost the start of the season I was saying that Mercedes are going to dominate this year, and they did at the start of the season. But then, because of the qualifying system, they went 3 or 4 races without a point, and then they ended up falling to the back again. And because they then dropped into the group qualifying a little bit further down, they've now come good again. So it almost seems like the best way to do it is to be average at the start, then crap, and then you'll end up with a great way to finish the season. You just want to kind of end up in that mid pack, so you're always getting into Group 2, and then you come strong at the end of the season. It's too much like chess for me. This is racing, not chess.
Yeah. It's that's the thing that really caught my eye. I've been able to catch some of the more recent events, New York, Brooklyn, and I had a friend of mine who was able to actually go there, which was interesting. Um, coworker wanted to go because he was already there, but they didn't allow them to. And I'm like, they were only giving tickets to certain people. And I'm like, there was plenty of empty seats there. Like if you're literally anywhere within the vicinity or Red Hook section of Brooklyn, you should have been allowed to get into that racetrack because there was really a whole lot of seats open. I would have went there for free, not for the ridiculous amounts of money they asked for that. And then of course London, I like the way they did it. It kind of fits because it's the electric motorsport deal. I think for the U.S. doing it in an arena setting the way they do Supercross and the way they used to do Race of Champions, using a stadium like an outdoor stadium in the NFL, like the old uh, LA Coliseum, for example. They have big hills, and you can do it would be like the old Mickey Thompson off road series where Jimmy Johnson used to race in way back when. Supercross used to race there. That would be a great one. They can't use the new LA stadium. I forget SoFi Stadium because that's where the Super Bowl is going to be and all kinds of stuff. But I think that's an idea that Formula E has brought in that I think is going to be great and might open up different options. But the qualifying sucks. It's not ideal. And if Nick DeVries loses the championship because of this format, I think it's a joke. You're not giving the best drivers a chance to actually compete for the title. You're basically leaving it up to going and donking off races. You're telling people, oh, let's throw 2 rounds or 3 rounds of a series out so we can fall back for a qualifying position. That's just really dumb. But we will see. Formula E will be back in a few weeks' time post Olympics. But Tom, you wanted to say something else?
No, all I was just going to say was I think it is going to change. I don't think it's going to stay like this for much longer. Formula E are open to shaking up the format. I think we'll probably see fan boost going because that's kind of being a bit. I've never been a fan of that, but that seems like I think that's going to be going. Attack Zone will be staying, but I'm pretty sure the qualifying format itself is going to change. So hopefully, come the Gen 3 cars, we'll see a different qualifying format, something a bit more competitive as opposed to punitive.
I think it would be better too if they did some sort of pit stop to add a little bit of strat to races. I think that would because as much as it seemed kind of hokey to drive the car swap, I kind of enjoyed that. There was something to actually rehearsing a car swap because you can't change the tires, you're not doing any of the other. But I think there was something to that. There was something to making sure you go and run a good in and out lap, so you're able to perform at the best level. I think the fact they don't have pit stops kind of affects the races, or like, okay, fine, they have a tax zone. Oh, you have to go and give yourself a gap so you can go run around. Like, that's fine. I mean, it doesn't, and I mean, there's other things I have about F Formula E that probably are why I'm not as into it as I used to be. But one thing I wanted to bring up before we go and kind of change the subject to what's coming up and what has went on, the manufacturer, recent manufacturer decisions. I know BMW is definitely leaving. I may be wrong about other manufacturers, but what does it say about? I mean, Andretti is going to stay in Formula E, but I mean, I don't know what they're looking at in regards to OEMs trying to come in. But what does it say about the health of the series when you have a couple of OEMs deciding to leave at this point and looking at alternative options like, the World Endurance Championship slash IMSA with the sports cars and prototypes, whether it's open wheel series elsewhere. Um, the other manufacturers are also deciding that that's not the best option to be running in Formula E after making a full court press to basically get there.
Yeah, it's. I don't think it's. I don't think it's like an epidemic of teams leaving at the moment. I mean, we're not losing teams off the grid. We're losing Audi and we're losing BMW, but they're just them as factory outlets ago, and we're not losing the teams off the grid. So I don't think it's a horrendous situation. You're always going to have manufacturers come and go because you've got the old adage, win on Sunday, buy on Monday, and that all of these teams are in the formula to win. If they're not winning, they're not going to stay. Or if they've reached what their target goal was to be in there to help their exposure and get their name known in other countries. And once they've reached that goal, they're not going to pump money into a formula that's where they're not going to be winning championships. So I don't think it's a major problem. You're always going to see them coming and going. They'll bring out a new gen car, and then somebody will see an opportunity to steal a march, and then you'll see another manufacturer come in, and who knows? You might see Ferrari in the future in Formula E. So yes, it certainly can't be unchecked. It's not a kind of thing where they're just like, oh well, who needs them? It's fine. We've got all these other manufacturers. It doesn't matter. They do need to be wary of it, and they do need to make sure that when they do their generation upgrades and changes, they are consulting the constructors because they are important, but they are not the be all and end all. You don't need. I mean, Formula One have proven that you don't need to have lots of manufacturers in the sport to be a global sport, and Formula E is still. This year is the first year. Technically, it's a global sport. This year will be the first time that the champion will be known as a world champion because it's the first time it has a world championship status, and that's just how the form kind of the formula organically grows. So I don't think we need to worry, but I just think it's something that just needs to be kept a check on and make sure that when they do their Gen 3 changes they are putting something in place that is going to be beneficial for manufacturers, and they may get a few more come in.
Yeah, so yeah, I agree. I mean, it is a product of racing. It's happened here in the States in sports cars, and NASCAR even, and multiple motorsports, in IndyCar too, frankly, and in other different forms of racing. And so we'll see. I think because Formula E is more, I mean, motorsport in its own right is its own niche. Um, Even though NASCAR doesn't believe that, but definitely it's a niche market. Formula E has its certain base they're trying to get to, and I think regards to Audi, of course, they've got sports car commitments and aspirations to go back to Le Mans and do what they were doing for all these years. It makes sense for them, and maybe they got what they wanted. BMW to the same point, but they're more committed on the GT side, or maybe they are going to do something else with Andretti. Who knows? Uh, it's a shame, really, because the DTM series is basically dead, and both of them left there too, for all intents and purposes, and or yeah, I mean all of them are more or less were gone. BMW left, and BMW and Audi were there last year, and then basically died. Mercedes had to leave before that because they weren't really competitive, and then they were doing all these other things. So it's something to be seen. Because some of the smaller teams, I guess maybe that gives an opportunity to some of the smaller outfits that have kind of struggled for a while, whether it's a Neo or some of the smaller like independent outfits, Envision, Virgin, which is now an independent outfit, might be a little. They're doing all right this year points wise, but they could be in a better place given some of these exits and some of the things that might change going forward. I'm gonna go and do the roundup. So this weekend, of course, we'll have Formula 3 and W Series at Hungary. When it comes to the Formula 3 World Championship, my screen just decided to go and freeze on that. That's great. I'm just going to go and change over before I go and talk about the races that are upcoming. We have Formula 3 W Series and British Touring Cars coming up this weekend. There's talk or rumors that Formula 2 and Formula 3, instead of this alternating schedule that they've had this year, are going to go back to the old format of where they're all running the same weekends or more or less running the same weekends. There might be a little bit of deviation. I don't know if you've heard anything about that, Tom, but
I've not. I saw the article, but I confess I haven't read it in any particular detail. I
yeah,
like the fact that they separate them. My only issue with it is that 3 races in one weekend for one formula is a bit much. I don't think you necessarily have to have 4 races with 2 formulas. I like that Formula 3 gets full coverage, as the backup for not the backup, the supporting formula, and
yeah,
for me it's put a lot more focus on those drivers. Like for me now, names like Dennis Hauger and Frederick Vesti are much more household names for me now that it was always for me, I would watch the Formula 1 obviously, and if there's IndyCar and Formula E, and then it gets to the Formula 2 and then I was like, I've still got to watch 2 Formula 3 races. Whereas if it's
yeah.
just 3 Formula 2 races, you kind of become invested in the narrative of the weekend and how one race affects the next race. And so I like the fact they're on alternate weekends, and I for one hope they keep it. Even if they did more race weekends and just did the 2 races, that would be fine as well, but they just did alternate weekends. I would be happy with that. But who knows? Who knows what their motivation is? I can't see how it's financially any better to run both at the same weekend. But hey ho, we'll see what they come up with.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I mean, Hauger's got a huge points lead. Was it 26 and 41 points over Vesti? Jack Doohan is finally coming through this year. Got a win. He's in. So the battle for second right now is very close. There's 4 drivers within 8 points with Vesti, Doohan, Ollie Caldwell, and Victor Martins. That's the top 5. And then after that, there's kind of like a drop off. Smolier, Novalak, Kaio Colette are all kind of in their own mini battle. 11 points between them. Nannini and Johnny Edgar. Then there's a huge drop off. Iwasa, Artur Leclerc, who won one of their sprints. You have Logan Sargent, who stood out last year and now is in a third-rate car. David Schumacher has one sprint win and nothing else. Enzo Fittipaldi has struggled this year. The other American drivers, Juan Manuel Correa, Jack Crawford, and Kalen Frederick, are all pretty buried. And then you have guys that haven't scored points, which is there's a good 9 or 10 of them there that haven't even scored a point this year. So,
but what a comeback from Correa though. I said it on my podcast. I say it here as well. I mean, I know he's only got the 9 points on there, but absolutely phenomenal comeback after what he went through to now be back in racing just over a year later is incredible, and he deserves all the respect and more that anyone can give him.
Yeah, and that is true in regards to his return. I mean, last year during the pandemic, he was basically racing with one arm and or both arms and one foot, or I believe that's what it was. And now he's able to drive a race car, a very competitive race car, again after the serious injuries he suffered in the accident that took place, which saw the untimely, unfortunate passing Anton Hubert. So that, and to recover from that, or be in recovery and be back in racing, whatever it is. HWA is not one of the best teams in that series anyway, but he is there, and he deserves credit for that for sure. And it's a great point you make there. We'll see what happens. Hauger has definitely taken a big step forward there. 3 seconds, 2 wins. He's very competitive. It's going to be very hard for those guys to come back, albeit there's still 12 rounds to go. So I mean, 12 races to go. So a lot of things can happen in 12 races, but we will see what happens with that. Albeit, pandemic could affect how many races they really do have. W Series was at uh, they're at Spielberg for 2 races in Silverstone. They'll be at Budapest this weekend. In regards to the standings so far, it's British. You could just play the British national anthem because Alice Powell, 2 wins out of 3. Defending champion Jamie Chadwick has the other win and 2 podiums, and then Sarah Moore is in third place. Wohlwend and Emma Kimmelainen is in the top 5. All these people I've never heard of. Bruna Tomaselli, ninth. Abby Eaton, the Stig Part 2, 11th. I think her girlfriend's up there. I don't know which one it is. I think it's Alice Powell's girlfriend. Betske Visser is in 12th. You have, of course, Vicky Perea, who's great to look at, has no points. Sabri Cook, the American, dead last. Very unfortunate. Ayla Agrin, or some of these girls I've never even heard of. That's part of the thing that makes it sad. You'd think they do a little better promotion, Jessica Hawkins. Like you would think they do better promotion after a year and a half, more than a year to prepare for all this. But the way they provide the races, BN Sports, it's kind of like in buried. They don't really do good promotion with it. The women that are actually good on social media promote it, but then when you consider some of them that are not really that good do a better job than the ones that are good. Kind of seems like LPGA tour level kind of stuff there.
Yeah, over here it doesn't really get an awful lot of coverage either. It's got a global television deal with Channel 4, which is partly down to David Coulthard running obviously Whisper Films and being commentator on the series and co-founder of the series as well. He puts a lot of weight behind it, so his name obviously carries a lot with Channel 4. So that's why Channel 4 have picked it up. Channel 4 to probably most of your listeners, it's like your NBC or ABC. It's another big network
Local channel, yeah.
over here, but they don't really promote it as well as they should do. It's on there, and if you know it's on, you can find it, but you don't see it anywhere. You have to physically search for it. They don't like plug it on the live sports section or anything like that. It's not something you'll just come across when you're scrolling through their website. It's not on any of their broadcast channels. You have to do it through streaming. It's only the races themselves you'll get on the television, and quite often it'll only be highlights, which is a bit of a shame. I would like it to. I hate Sky. Don't get me wrong, I hate Sky, but I would like it to fall onto the F1 TV / Sky schedule, so they have all of the support series on the same thing, and they can plug them equally. You say, right, okay, that's practice done. So you can head off and watch a race in W Series, or you got your Formula 3 race coming up, and they can just, they can drive the Formula 1 fans to these other formulas if they want to watch more racing. I'd like to see that. But at the moment, they don't even mention W Series.
And it's a shame considering they're running on the same weekend. I find that to be very hard to believe. And some of the women are actually connected to the teams, and that makes it even more disappointing, especially when you consider the plight of women in racing and how many of them that are actually good but don't get any traction, and how many whores get through and can't drive a hot nail through snow, um, unless it's got KY jelly in it and it's going somewhere else. But that's beside the point. Uh, I'll get into British touring car briefly. Here they're running their fourth round, Alton Park, this weekend. I love how motorsport.com doesn't even bother to provide the points or anything like that. We'll get into more detail next week as we build back up into racing again, because I think we'll have Watkins Glen next week. I might be wrong. Who knows? I probably am wrong. What is it? I'm just gonna go and do this for myself. So so Nashville, and then Road America will be next week. Oh yeah, so next week at least we'll have racing again. So that's good. Full complement of racing. So we'll get into that more in detail with the British touring cars. Last week we had World Superbike at Assen. The race one winner was Jonathan Ray over Scott Redding and Toprak Rasugulu. Garrett Gerloff finished sixth in that race. And then in the Super Pole race, Johnny Ray over Michael Rubin Rinaldi Rasugulu. Gerloff finished eighth. Then in race two, Garrett Gerloff and Rasugulu crashed into each other, which is great, unless you're a Yamaha person or you're a fan of either of those riders. Or if you're a fan of Johnny Ray, since the guy really needs help to go and win a World Superbike title, because he's won like six straight World Superbike titles. I don't even know how many years ago it was, and Johnny Ray was just some guy on a Honda, and now he's won 6 straight World Superbike championships, going on 7. I don't know when the fuck that happened, but it's probably going to. He beat Scott Redding and Andrea Locatelli. Chaz Davies and Alvaro Bautista woke up from rousted from slumber, and actually got a top 5 on a Honda. That's a throwback to years past when Hondas were actually competitive in Superbike. Johnny Ray has a 37-point lead over Rasugulu. That's basically the battle. Redding is in his own little world. Lowe's fourth, Rinaldi fifth, Gerloff. So Michael Rubin Rinaldi, Garrett Gerloff, Michael Vandermark, and Tom Sykes are within their battle, and there are 9 points between the 4 of them. So that's something to see, Garrett. There's some of these guys might be going to MotoGP. There might be some things moving. We'll see about that. Hopefully Garrett Gerloff gets a look. It may be a little bit rushed, but Yamaha doesn't really have a whole lot of options, in large part because Valentino Rossi is basically toast, even with the fact he's going to probably move to his own team. The other series, DTM, go over that briefly because it is DTM. Nobody really cares anymore. But I want to give it its due because it is racing. And they were racing last week. And I think we did talk about it while I was zoning out on the show last week. So let's see here. All right, come on, computer. Do me a favor. Yeah, there you go. Race 1, Philip Ellis over Liam Lawson and Mike Rockenfeller was the top 3. Alex Albon got a top 5. Look at that. The American Indian guy finished 12th, and Arjun Maini was a non-placer. Sophia Florsch, great social media thing on Instagram, doesn't do much in a DTM car. Race 2 saw, I think is Maximilian Gotts, but yeah, Maximilian Gotts over Liam Lawson, Kelvin Vanderlinde. So Mercedes, Ferrari, Audi. Philip Ellis, Sheldon Vanderlyn to the top 5. Going back there, Miney got a 12th place, and Dev Gore 17th. Super. Not shocking. The standings going into the next round, Vanderlinde has a 5-point lead over Liam Lawson. Then Ellis and Gotts are only 2 points behind each other for third. Albon 5th, Sheldon Vanderlinde 6th, Wittman 7th. There's really about 10 guys that have really done anything. Neither of the people that I'm looking at, Flourish or the other, I think that's a girl too, have done anything. And that's kind of sad. With that, I'll throw it over to you, Tom. Thank you for coming on this evening for you, this afternoon for me, to cover for Josh. Where can we find the Monkey Seat podcast on the socials and whatever channels that we can download your show?
You can pretty much find us anywhere. We get about a bit. Just search for Monkey See Podcast, and you'll find us. We're on YouTube. We do live stream most of our shows. My co-host Carl is a little bit busy at the moment, and myself as well, going on my doing a Josh and going on vacation next week. So he's going to have to go without me next week. First show I've missed actually ever. So that'll be interesting how that pans out. But yeah, you can get us on the socials at Monkey Seat Pod, and we're on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, all the ones out there you can get. If you go to monkeyseatpod.com, you can click on the podcast links tab, and you'll see all of our providers on there. You can just click on whichever one that you want to use, or click on all of them and listen to us 50 times. That'd be good. So yeah, no, it's great fun. We do a very similar thing to Phil, so it's Phil and Josh covering a lot of motorsport. But what you just went through there were definitely words. With all of the touring cars and MotoGP, I agree they're words. I don't know what they meant, because I just don't know anything about sports cars or motorbikes or anything like that. So we kind of stick to Formula One, your Formula E, IndyCar, and we touch on the Junior Series and the W Series as well. And we do a bit of Extreme E, because we have Ian Davis comes on from Veloce, and he talks to us after each race and lets us know how the team got on and how things happened and everything, which is great. We really appreciate what he does for us. So yeah, come and give us a shout.
And thank you again for coming on. Before we go here this afternoon or this evening, my computer yet again is deciding to flame out on me. In regards, I'll do it this way, because this piece of machinery is working, so that's what I'm going to do. Give me a second, right over here. Where can you find the Grip Strip podcast? I should know this by now. It's my show, but I don't. You can find myself, Philip G. Matthew, on Twitter at Philip G. Matthew. You can find the Grip Strip pod at Grip Strip Pod on Twitter. Our show appears on Podbean, of course, the host site, but we're on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn. We are also on Pandora and other things, whatever. There's an Amazon Music. It might have said that. But the fact is, you can find us almost anywhere. As Tom said, we go over all different types of motorsports. I always say it to people when they ask, "Oh, you do a podcast? What is it about?" And I say, as long as it goes fast, we probably talk about it. How well we talk about it depends on how much I've drank, and how much I care. But it is what it is. It's a passion project for all of us. It's how Tom and I and everybody have met through the F1 Grid Talk podcast. It's another one that's really taking off this year. George Housen and company are doing such a great job there. And there are so many good people that we're all able to work together and do the show, and we're all fans. And that's where we've all met and kind of come together as a small little community and family. And
definitely give them a listen as well.
Yeah.
F1 Chronicle. Search for them. They're straight after the races. You get your race reviews an hour after the race, qualifying review an hour after the qualifying. So
Yeah.
always worth a listen. And you might hear our dulcet tones as well occasionally.
Yeah, we kind of throw our 2 cents in. If you really want to listen to me talk about Egghead and Putin Haas, it usually happens, at least if I'm on. It pains most everybody else that seems to go on Good Talk to talk about them. So I just use the opportunity to come up with different scenarios in my mind that could possibly take place, like Liam Neeson going and doing a movie with Egghead and Mick Schumacher, like I talked about a few episodes ago. Yeah, so you can find me there, sportlightpro.com, which is George's website. Writing there, or I was. We'll see what happens as the year goes along, since I have a decent job now. No vacations for me, theoretically. I will have vacation, which is ironic in a few weeks, but I'll still be here, still doing the show because racing will be back, and racing is part of my life. And I'm not married yet, and I'm not close. So this is part of my life. Thanks again to everyone for listening. Thank you, Tom, for coming on, giving us some time during your evening, and giving us so much great information and content and takes in regards to the open wheel side of things, giving more education in regards to Formula E, because I know there aren't a lot of people here in the States that are really invested in it. So I think that was cool. Um, I think presentation wise, they're on CBS Sports Network too. Doesn't help their cause. I think the only reason I think I watch is because they have a couple good looking women that do presenting, but then also Dario Franchitti is the lead analyst, and I've always been a fan of Dario Franchitti. But thank you so much, Tom, for coming on and giving us your time here this evening.
It's always a pleasure. Happy to come
And
back anytime.
and we'll make sure that if that is the case, if I do need you in a relief role, then it will be at a time that is actually reasonable for you and good for me too, because then it's less likely that I'll do things that are probably a bit questionable. So uh, we thank you all for listening to the Grip Strip podcast. Give Tom and Co. A listen, download the whole bit for the Monkey See podcast. They do great work. They're going over all the open wheel series. They get guests because they're more professional. And if you want to see a tighter or hear a tighter, more professional deal, definitely listen to Tom and the boys there, or Grid Talk. If you just want to listen to two people, or at least one guy just talk out of his ass, but has a lot of passion for it, that's me. And if you want to listen to one guy who's a straight laced guy, that's Josh. And we both bring the info and we both have fun. And that's the Grid Talk podcast. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking football. We'll be talking American football since training camp is opening. We'll be talking about racing again since the Olympics will be on the back end. There will be plenty of racing next week coming up to preview all over the world, and we'll talk about that. And the Formula One Hungarian Grand Prix that Max Verstappen probably will win and still be bitching about what happened to him at Silverstone last 2 weeks ago. So we thank you once again for listening to Grip Strip Podcast. Take care and take care of one another. Goodbye.